We got the results from the polygraph. We couldn't believe what we saw.
Holy crap. I made a deal with the devil.
Oh my gosh, what have we done?
When we got the call from the babysitter saying that my sister was hours and hours late to picking her daughter up, we really just didn't have any explanation whatsoever.
On the morning of April 27, 2016, Tricia Todd was expected to pick up her daughter, Faith, from the babysitter before heading to work. But she never showed up. This sudden absence set off alarms among those who knew her. Tricia was reliable, punctual, and devoted to her daughter. Her colleagues, worried by her no-show at work, began calling her, but there was no response. Calls to her family and friends yielded the same results: silence. And as hours passed, worry turned into fear. Her brother John Todd immediately contacted the Martin County Sheriff's Office, reporting his sister as missing. Tricia Todd's journey began on February 19, 1986, in Stewart, Martin County, Florida. She was the beloved daughter of David and Rebecca Todd, and grew up in a seemingly perfect family, surrounded by love and support. She shared a special bond with her brothers and cherished the close-knit community they lived in. After graduating from high school, Tricia decided to serve her country by joining the U.S. Air Force. Since childhood, Tricia had shared a close friendship with Stephen Williams. They had known each other for years, and as fate would have it, Stephen also joined the Air Force. Even during her deployments to Kuwait and Iraq, their bond remained unbroken. Like a fairy tale, they got married and eventually had a daughter, Faith. However, their marriage began to deteriorate after 11 years, leading to a divorce. Despite this, Tricia and Stephen worked to keep things amicable for the sake of their daughter. Following the divorce, Tricia left the Air Force and moved to Hobe Sound, Florida, with Faith. A devoted Christian with a heart full of compassion, Tricia pursued a new dream of helping others by becoming a registered nurse. She earned her degree and began working at Treasure Coast Hospice. On the night of April 26, 2016, Tricia went out for a walk. The next morning, when she didn't pick up Faith, her family knew something was terribly wrong. When Tricia's family rushed to her home, they were met with an unsettling scene. The lights were on, and groceries were neatly arranged on the counter, as if she had just returned from shopping. But Tricia was nowhere to be found. Her car was missing, and even more disturbingly, her phone and purse were left behind. As worry escalated, they frantically searched the area and brainstormed possible places she could have gone. A neighbor noticed something strange. Tricia's car was parked across the street in an unusual spot, like someone was deliberately hiding it. Inside the car, they found her purse and keys. Where could she have gone without them? Realizing that something was terribly wrong, her family contacted the police. They immediately issued a bolo, "Be on the lookout," for Tricia. The search began immediately. Volunteers from the community, along with law enforcement, scoured the area. They searched through dense woods, swamps, and every possible place where she could have gone. The search was exhaustive, with teams using helicopters, drones, and dogs, but there was no sign of Tricia.
Right now, authorities and volunteers are ramping up in their search for a young mom who disappeared without a trace.
With Tricia officially declared missing, the investigation kicked into high gear. The first 48 hours are critical in any missing persons case, and the Martin County Sheriff's Office knew they had to act fast. The first step was to secure the scene and gather as much evidence as possible from Tricia's home and car. Investigators meticulously combed through her house, looking for any signs of a struggle, but there was nothing out of place. The scene was eerily calm, with everything in its proper place, except Tricia. The car, however, was a different story. The fact that her purse and keys were left inside suggested that Tricia didn't leave willingly. This raised several red flags for the detectives. Who had parked the car there, and why? It became imperative to find out the last person who had seen or spoken to Tricia. In today's world, surveillance cameras are often key to solving mysteries like this. Investigators quickly obtained footage from cameras near Tricia's home, the grocery store, and other locations she might have visited. The footage showed Tricia shopping at a grocery store on the evening of April 26th. She was alone, purchasing items that were later found in her home, confirming she had returned. But that was the last time anyone saw her. Police analyzed the footage frame by frame, looking for any unusual activity or potential suspects. They also reviewed traffic cameras along possible routes she might have taken. But there was no sign of Tricia after she left the store. It was as if she had simply disappeared between the store and her home. The investigators looked into Tricia's social circles, her friendships, and any possible romantic relationships that could have played a role in her disappearance. One lead that initially caught the investigators' attention was Tricia's infatuation with a local ventriloquist and musician named Brent Vernon. Friends of Tricia mentioned that she had become somewhat obsessed with Brent, frequently attended his performances, and stalked him on social media. She once told her friend about a dramatic plan to profess her love for Brent. It seemed like a far-fetched idea, but it was enough to make the investigators take a closer look. After thoroughly investigating this angle, detectives concluded that Brent had nothing to do with Tricia's disappearance. As the investigation into Tricia Todd's disappearance continued, detectives turned their attention to a local preacher named Douglas Purchase. This older gentleman had met Tricia while she was out on her late-night walks along the beach. This was not unusual. Tricia often went to the beach to pray and find solace. Purchase claimed that he felt compelled to speak to Tricia, and their conversations often revolved around faith and spirituality. Despite Purchase's claims of innocence, the detectives couldn't overlook the fact that he had interacted with Tricia so close to her disappearance. Moreover, there was something about his demeanor that raised red flags.
Let me ask you this, on a personal level. Were you attracted to her? She's a very attractive girl. Maybe somewhat. Okay.
When asked to take a polygraph test, Purchase initially agreed but then refused, citing religious reasons. Detectives then searched Purchase's home and vehicle, desperate for any evidence. Despite thorough search, they found nothing suspicious. Purchase continued to insist that he had nothing to do with what happened to Tricia, and that his interest in her was purely spiritual. When detectives reviewed security footage from the beach on the night Tricia went missing, the cameras confirmed Purchase's alibi. He had been on the beach, but not with Tricia. With no evidence linking him to the crime, Purchase was eventually cleared as a suspect. Before the police could delve deeper into the mystery, another twist emerged. Tricia and Faith had been scheduled to meet someone that day. On the evening of April 26th, Faith was found safe at the babysitter's house. So how did Faith end up there? If Tricia hadn't dropped her off, then who did? The babysitter might have been the last person to see Tricia before she vanished. The answer lay with the babysitter. Under the pressure of a police interrogation, the truth came to light. It wasn't Tricia who had brought Faith to the babysitter. It was her ex-husband, Stephen Williams, Faith's father. Stephen Williams had a clear alibi. He had driven down from his military base in North Carolina to spend time with their daughter Faith. He rented an Airbnb for his stay and had been seen around town with Faith in the days leading up to Tricia's disappearance. As more questions swirled around Stephen, a crucial lead surfaced. One of Tricia's neighbors informed that they saw Tricia driving her car later that evening, on April 26, 2016. When the police traced Tricia's phone, it led them straight to the Airbnb where Stephen was staying. There was no doubt Stephen had to be questioned next. During the interrogation, Stephen admitted that Tricia had visited him with Faith. Before leaving, Tricia promised to return the next morning. When she didn't show up, Stephen claimed he took Faith to the babysitters because he had to report back to work. As time ticked by, fresh leads became scarce. And then, in a twist no one anticipated, Tricia herself did provide answers. Tricia kept a journal, a private sanctuary for her thoughts, emotions, and most crucially, her darkest secrets. The journal revealed a side of Stephen that no one had suspected. Far from being the loving childhood friend everyone believed him to be, Stephen had been abusive toward Tricia. The journal detailed horrific incidents, including one where Stephen had kicked her in the stomach while she was pregnant.
He beat on her. I know he would punch her in the stomach trying to give her a miscarriage when she was pregnant. But whether she thought he would cross the line, I don't know.
The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source, Stephen's own mother. She stepped forward with a statement against her son.
That said that he was Trish that disappeared. I said, did you have anything to do with it? He said, no, I had nothing to do with that. And I'll believe him.
Stephen didn't love Tricia. In fact, he harbored a deep, seething hatred for her. This hatred was so intense that it extended to everything Tricia loved. In a chilling act of cruelty, Stephen had strangled and killed 2 of Tricia's dogs. But Stephen's malevolence didn't stop there. His ultimate goal was to make Tricia herself disappear. The detectives kept an eye on the potential involvement of Stephen Williams' girlfriend, Laura. Laura had been in a relationship with Stephen for some time, even before his divorce from Tricia was finalized. This relationship naturally raised questions. Had Laura known about or even aided in Tricia's disappearance? Laura initially appeared cooperative. She was in North Carolina during the time Tricia went missing and provided an alibi, claiming she had been at work. To confirm her story, detectives checked Laura's work records and spoke to her coworkers. The investigation confirmed that Laura had been at her job during the days Tricia vanished. However, when detectives began to uncover details about Stephen and his treatment of both Tricia and Laura, she revealed a chilling detail about her own life. Laura was really in love with Stephen, but she knew something wasn't right. She would sometimes mention how Stephen would get really angry over small things, especially when it came to talking about Tricia. As the detectives pieced together the timeline, it became clear that while Laura might not have been directly involved in Tricia's disappearance, she had likely been manipulated by Stephen. Her fear of losing him, combined with his controlling behavior, might have made her overlook or rationalize his darker tendencies. As detectives pressed further, Laura's initial cooperation began to wane. She became increasingly defensive. They requested that Laura should take a polygraph test to eliminate her as a suspect. At first, Laura agreed, seemingly eager to clear her name. As the test approached, Laura abruptly changed her mind, refused to take polygraph test, and claimed she had anxiety.
I don't think I want to do a polygraph anymore.
In the final interviews, detectives pressed what Laura knew about Stephen's plans or behavior during the time Tricia went missing. Laura maintained her innocence. However, when detectives told Laura that Stephen had killed Tricia's pets, a chilling memory hit her. Not long before Tricia vanished, something terrible had happened to Laura's dog. She found her beloved pet dead under strange circumstances. Stephen was the only person around the dog, but when Laura confronted him, he dismissed her fears, insisting it was just an accident. Laura now had fear in her eyes. She started to suspect Stephen's involvement in this case. In the end, Laura was not charged with any crimes related to Tricia's disappearance. However, the investigation revealed troubling details about Stephen's character. This was a man who had shown a capacity for cruelty, both towards animals and his loved ones. Stephen was brought in for questioning again. At first, he appeared cooperative, answering questions and expressing concern for Tricia's well-being. However, he stubbornly stuck to his story, claiming he knew nothing about her disappearance. But the truth was starting to unravel, and once again, CCTV footage became the turning point in the investigation. The police painstakingly reviewed hours of footage from various locations. It was a tedious process, but their persistence paid off. Footage from a gas station near Stephen's Airbnb showed him filling up both his car and Tricia's on the night she disappeared. When confronted, Stephen spun another tale, claiming he only drove her car to get gas. However, this lie was easily exposed. When the police found Tricia's car the next morning, its gas tank was nearly empty. But there was more. CCTV footage from a neighbor's security camera showed Stephen near Tricia's house that same night, well after she was last seen alive. This placed him at the crime scene at a critical time. It was evident that his original story was a fabrication. So on May 24, 2016, Stephen was arrested. Detectives knew they needed more than just circumstantial evidence. They needed a confession, or at the very least, a lead to Tricia's whereabouts. But Stephen, a trained military man, was smart. He knew how to manipulate the situation, providing just enough information to keep investigators at bay while maintaining his innocence. At this point, the police decided to bring in additional resources. They collaborated with the Air Force's Office of Special Investigations, OSI. The OSI provided valuable insights into Stephen's behavior, drawing from their experiences with military personnel who had committed similar crimes. The collaboration between the Sheriff's Office and the OSI marked a turning point in the investigation. They began to apply psychological pressure, confronting Stephen with inconsistencies in his story and the mounting evidence against him. The surveillance footage of him driving Tricia's car was particularly damning, and the detectives used it to their advantage. Detective Yesenia Carde led the interrogation. She used a combination of empathy and strategic questioning, trying to get Stephen open up. She knew that if she could create just a crack in his armor, it might be enough to make him slip. Under relentless questioning, Stephen's story began to change. According to his latest version, Stephen claimed he didn't know about Tricia's disappearance because she was already dead. He had gone to Tricia's house to retrieve her laptop at her request, but when he returned to his Airbnb, he found Tricia lying on the floor, nearly dead. Panicked, Stephen thought Tricia was trying to frame him in some elaborate scheme. He loaded her into her car and drove to a random, secluded location. There, he laid her body on the ground, crossing her arms as if to stage some macabre scene. But why didn't he take her to the hospital or call 911? Stephen's excuse was absurd. He claimed she wasn't really dead, so he left her phone beside her in case she needed to call for help.
But if things happen the way you said it did, then there's really no reason why you shouldn't just take us to her. You know what I'm saying? We can prove, okay, or if there's no other injuries or anything on her, we can say, okay, well, it must have happened the way he said it did. And he just did a bonehead move and freaking brought her out here instead of calling 911 or taking her to a hospital. That's a misdemeanor compared to a freaking homicide charge. You know what I mean? Yes. So if things happen the way you said it did, I don't see why you're just not taking us to her. You know what I mean?
Stephen claimed that in his panic, he had driven aimlessly, barely aware of where he was going. He insisted that he had no memory of where he finally stopped the car or where he left Tricia. But he was somehow able to change his clothes right after that.
The only reason you would not take us to a body is because she didn't die the way you're explaining.
I can't tell you where that is. I don't know where that is.
Despite Detective Yesenia Carde's relentless efforts to cut through his lies, Stephen stubbornly clung to his fabricated story. When it became clear that Stephen wasn't going to crack, Detective Michael Oliver took over. Oliver had a different approach. He aimed to wear Stephen down by making him talk about the details over and over again, looking for any small inconsistency that could be exploited.
You are in her car for 2 hours, correct?
No.
No?
I have her car, yes, but I don't know where I am. I'm not driving it for 2 hours.
Okay, are you stopped for an hour? Are you stopped for 45 minutes? Are you stopped? When you go down the dusty road...
I don't know how long.
I don't care. What I'm saying to you is, I'm not asking for you to give me times. Okay? I'm asking for you to tell me what you were doing. We know the time. Okay. The time is set in stone. It's 2 hours and something. Okay. All right? And so for 2 hours and something, you are in or around her car with her at a minimum unconscious or lifeless body, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what are you doing?
I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what to do.
These are the big things.
In my head is it's a terrible situation for me now.
Here, let's role play, okay? Mr. Backadall, I pulled down the dusty road and I sat there. It could have been hours, and I just thought, what the hell am I going to do? What the hell am I going to do? Or, Mr. Backadall, I drove around for a long time. And we know it couldn't be that because you'd run out of gas. Mr. Backetall, I parked on that dirt road, and I walked up and down the road, pacing, because I've got this situation that I can't explain.
Oliver's method was relentless. He engaged Stephen in long conversations, asking him to recount his story repeatedly. Oliver knew that the more Stephen talked, the more likely he was to slip up. And after hours of questioning, that's exactly what happened. Stephen began to contradict himself. First, he claimed that Tricia had left his Airbnb after a brief visit. Then, under pressure, he claimed that she never actually arrived. Finally, Oliver probed the two most volatile aspects of the case: money and custody of their daughter. That's when Stephen revealed the grim reality. Tricia had confronted him about child support that night. The argument escalated rapidly and turned hostile.
Just flashbacks. I go to push her away, and then she gets really pissed about that. And then she gets even more aggressive and in my face and pushing me back. And I'm like, would you please just stop? And so I went to move her away, and she slipped and she hit her head. And I didn't mean for that. That wasn't my freaking fault. I wasn't. And then all I'm thinking is, great, now I've pushed her and she's hurt her head, and I'm done. I'm just, everything I've tried to do, everything I've tried to be is done because I made a mistake. I didn't even lose my cool. I just tried to move you away. I just tried to de-escalate the situation because I couldn't get out. I didn't know where to go. I couldn't even just leave. All I wanted to do was just leave. I just wanted nothing to do with that.
Do you know what she hit her head on? Was it the floor or?
I don't know. She just fell, and then she wasn't responsive after that. And I didn't know what the hell to do.
After hours of interrogation, Stephen finally broke down. But the confession he gave was not the truth. It was a twisted version of events designed to make him look like the victim. He claimed that during a heated argument, Tricia had slipped and hit her head, and in his panic, he had decided to hide her body. But even this story didn't hold water. The detectives knew that Stephen was still hiding something much darker. They needed the location of Tricia's body, and for that, they had to push Stephen further.
Do you love your daughter?
Of course I do. Of course I do.
Okay. You need to give her mother back to her.
I can't.
Okay, I told you she's going to need some type of stability.
I have no
and you're all she's got.
I don't even know
you
where
are the only living parent that she has left. Show your daughter right that you took us to her mother. You need to show her right. She's going to grow up saying, my dad did something to my mom, and he left her out. He left my mom out to get eaten by animals. Is that what you want your daughter to grow up thinking? Knowing? Then take me to her.
Stephen finally agreed. It wasn't out of guilt or a change of heart. The police needed to recover Tricia's body, and Stephen saw an opportunity to cut a deal. The detectives offered a plea bargain. If he led them to her remains, he would face a lesser charge of second-degree murder, carrying a 35-year sentence. Seeing no other way out, Stephen accepted the deal. He led them to the John C. and Mariana Jones Hungryland Wildlife and Environmental Area, a remote stretch of land spanning Martin and Palm Beach counties. There, hidden away in a tub, they found Tricia's remains, tragically confirming the worst. The story went to an even darker twist. Stephen's crime was far more calculated and brutal than anyone had initially realized. Through additional questioning and forensic evidence, detectives uncovered a horrifying truth. Stephen had been planning Tricia's murder for months. On April 26, 2016, Stephen put his plan into motion. He lured Tricia to his Airbnb under the pretense of discussing their daughter, Faith. When she arrived, he ambushed her, knocking her unconscious, but not killing her. She was only temporarily subdued, and Stephen, coldly calculating, decided to wait until she regained consciousness. His twisted plan involved extracting her email password to send a series of messages, making it seem like she had abandoned her life and daughter. However, when Tricia awoke, she began to scream. Stephen's control over the situation slipped. In a fit of rage, he decided to silence her permanently. He punched her with such force that it ended her life, while their 2-year-old daughter slept in the next room. After ending Tricia's life, Stephen went to extreme lengths to cover his tracks. He placed her body in a trash bag and drove to the Hungryland Wildlife Reserve, where he buried her in a shallow grave. Initially, he planned to use Tricia's car for the task, but when he realized it was nearly out of gas, he made a critical mistake. He went to get gas, unknowingly allowing multiple CCTV cameras to capture him driving Tricia's car. Stephen had meticulously planned every detail, even going as far as purchasing a chainsaw. Stephen then returned to North Carolina, determined to erase any trace of Tricia. He set out to remove her teeth and fingerprints, ensuring that her body, if ever found, would be impossible to identify. But his brutality didn't stop there. He dismembered her remains and attempted to dissolve her in a tub of muriatic acid, hoping to leave nothing behind. On September 30th, 2016, Stephen Williams was sentenced to 35 years in prison for second-degree murder and child neglect as per the plea deal. By that point, Stephen had already served 130 days in Martin County Prison. Additionally, the state prosecution demanded over $67,000 in restitution to be paid to the Martin County Sheriff's Office to cover the costs of the investigation. While the sentence brought some measure of justice, it could never undo the damage he had caused. Tricia's family, while devastated, found solace in their faith and the memories of the vibrant woman she had been. During the sentencing, Tricia's father, Todd, shared heartfelt memories of his daughter, astonishing everyone by making a wish for Stephen's well-being. Despite the immense pain Stephen had inflicted on their family, David expressed hope that Stephen might change, find peace through faith, and take advantage of educational opportunities in prison. Tricia Todd was laid to rest with full military honors at the South Florida National Cemetery in Lake Worth, a fitting tribute to a life of service and sacrifice. Her family, particularly her father, found solace in their faith, believing that Tricia's soul was at peace. They chose to remember her not for the way she died, but for the way she lived, with love, compassion, and an unwavering belief in the goodness of God. In the aftermath of their loss, they found solace in raising their granddaughter, Faith, a name that now carried the weight of miracles. That fateful night, she lost both her parents, one to a heinous act of violence, the other to a prison cell. Faith was raised by her uncle and aunt, who provided her with a loving home. Though she will grow up without her mother, she will always carry a piece of Tricia's spirit with her, a reminder of the strength and resilience that defined her mother's life. Thank you for watching this in-depth exploration of the tragic case of Tricia Todd. If there's one takeaway from this story, it's the importance of seeking help when faced with domestic violence. No one should have to endure what Tricia went through, and it's vital to reach out to friends, family, or support organizations if you're in danger. Finally, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. Did Stephen's girlfriend have anything to do with this? How might the criminal justice system ensure a balance between accountability and rehabilitation? Also, if you have any suggestions for other cases you'd like us to cover, please mention them in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe.